I would like to talk about a U.S. global water pipeline grid on every continent. I started this in 2015 to 2016. So I was watching a PBS documentary one night, and it was about a oil pipeline. And then the thought popped into my mind about a U.S. global water pipeline. So if you look at these, I'm using a straw for an example. I don't know if you ever drunk from a straw before. You see how powerful it is when you drink from a cup. Well, we got pumps that are 10,000 more times or 1,000 times more powerful than that. So basically, if you look at the straws, there's four straws. So the reason why I'm using four straws, we're going from east to west and north to south. And what people don't realize is that the two straws that are running east to west are equivalent to 2,000 miles. And the straws are running from north to south is equivalent to 1,000 miles. So that's 2, 4, 5, 6,000 miles. What people don't realize is that the Romans built 6 to 8,000 miles of aqueducts. So they've already basically built a water pipeline grid 2,000 years ago, and we haven't done anything close to that. So why is this important today? So basically, this doesn't just apply to America. This applies to the whole world. As our numbers increase, we have to go back and look at the beginning before humans. So if we look at the sun, it's round, and the world is round. So the world rotates around the sun. Why? Is because we all have to share the sun. So that means that the Creator's intent was for us all to share equally. So when we look at sunlight, everybody has sunlight. We look at air, everybody has air, and everybody has water. So those things are out of our control. Those are the Creator's intent. So now when it comes to things that, come from the earth, like our food, our trees, everything that comes from the earth, it was there long before man. So that means that everything was already there before man. So that proves the intent that the Creator created everything, and everything was free, no matter how you look at it. So we look at money. Money can be considered an abstract concept. The reason why is because money is what is used to motivate people to build their infrastructure, their empires. But the problem now is we're limited to money. And so if you look at the human population, as the human population increases from the beginning of time, people always like to live on the coastlines. Well, people don't like to live in the interior. And why do people not like to live in the interior? It's because it's always about water. It's never about your merchandise, your products, your food, because that can always be imported by the issues, but it's a comfort zone. So when you live along the coastlines, it's always been a comfort zone. So we go back to the Creator's intent. So we talk about redundancy and load balancing, and that is where your redundancy and load balancing is. So when people from the beginning always like to live on the coastline because it was easy access to water. So the redundancy is that the Creator gave us. He gave us fish. So if we live on the coast, it's easy to fish. He gave us game. Game likes to live by water, so you mostly find it on the coastline or by rivers. And then you'll always find crops. Crops are easier to grow because they're on the coastline. So survival was always easier on the coastline. But as our numbers increase, nobody likes to live in the interior because why? The coastline offers comfort zones. But the cities grow. As the cities grow, nobody likes to move into the interior. So how do you solve that problem? This is one solution to that problem. But then we have other problems. We have global warming. So now we have rising water. Then we have forest fires, droughts, and floods. Well, you can do better load balancing with people move to the interior. You can control floods, you can control droughts, and you can control forest fires. So I'll go on to some more photos here. So I was having a conversation with my daughter, and it kind of went like this. So I told her, let me scroll back up here. So I said I was just sharing information and hopefully benefit people and humanity one day. And she says it's also amazing to know that the ancient ancestors did something like this, so it shows it. Let me back up a little bit of how this got started. Okay. So I sent her the photos of the water pipeline grid, and I told her about the reason why I was using straws, and I just told her I was sharing information. And she says it's also amazing to know that ancient ancestors did something like this, so it shows. So, and I told her yes, the Mayans had built their empire deep into the interior and across the interior. But what the Mayans did was they had built huge storage systems to collect that water. But they had droughts for 15 years, so they could not predict that they would ever have droughts for 15 years. So they had to move from the interior back out to the exterior. But if they had did like the Romans and had a water pipeline grid, they could have thrived a lot longer than what they probably did. So she says, can you do something like this for your home and need a large group for people? So basically, yes, this is not something that one individual can take on. This is something that everybody would have to think about, talk about, and communicate to solve these problems. And if they feel it's a good idea. But what you got to remember is it isn't something you do overnight. It's something that takes time. So if you look at a prime example is the Great Wall of China. So the Great Wall of China, most people don't realize it took 1,800 years to complete the Great Wall of China. So a project like this, you would just basically work on the coast and work your way inwards over time. But then it would benefit future generations. So even China now, with all the money they have, they use it to build up their infrastructure. So then back to the conversation, it says, are you talking about the pipeline grid? If yes, then it would take government. And I said I started this in 2015. And here's a link. So I told her basically, if you click on it, if you go to Facebook and you type in search for the, I'm sorry, if you type on a search for a water pipeline grid, or you type in, do a search on Mission Noah, then you'll see all of the results. And basically, this is the results right here. So I used to work in Grove City, and a place was called Sound Communications. Basically, what we did was we built servers, and we deployed servers to record audio from analog or digital phones, so employers can go back and replay that. It's kind of in-depth software, but that's where we did it at. But one day they were building a parking lot for a new apartment complex across the street. So as I observed them building this parking lot, this is a water storage system. So this is basically like the same concept as a water pipeline grid. So if you do a search on Mission Noah, and this was the letter that I wrote to all of Congress and all of the global leaders in during this period of time. So if you do the search, you can go here and you can read this letter in its entirety. But this is basically just showing you all the members of Congress and world leaders that I sent this to. So then and here is the link, and these are all the members of Congress that I located to. Now, the only thing about sending this to Facebook or through Facebook, a lot of representatives may never even seen this because of the amount of traffic across Facebook. So basically, this is why I'm also doing this video. So now if I'm going to go back to this conversation with my daughters, and then here, this is where we left off. So this is one of the replies from Facebook from Matthew Valenti. He said he thought it was very interesting, but I have people that did reply, and then I sent a letter to the White House and President Obama. This was the reply I got back from President Obama. And then I have conversations where I put all of my Facebook comments in here. And this is a reply from AI. So if you go to Facebook, this is me, this is my address. So you can basically scroll through if you like, and you can see the conversations that I put in here on Facebook. About the water pipeline grid system. So our numbers are increasing, but that's always a good thing. I always say more the merrier, because people don't realize that in the beginning of time, when people were building infrastructure, we had very few people, because the world population didn't reach 1 billion until the 1800s. So people had to put in a lot of hours, and there was records of forced labor, slavery. So now we have way more people. And the problem is now is that we're limited by money, and why some people aren't in the workforce, and why some people aren't working is because we instead of basing everything on do we have enough material to build our infrastructure and repair our infrastructure and build a utopia, and the answer should always be yes, because when we don't, and it's based on money, we have people that aren't working. And so what happened was during the Depression, and people were jumping out of windows. Some people, I would assume that in the movie Titanic, they did a great job of showing the one comment from the girl's mother that had the diamond. She says, can you see why she wanted her to marry this guy regardless, even though she didn't love him? She says, can you see me being a seamstress? Can you see me mopping floors? So a lot of people that have money have that attitude. But the attitude that they should have is, okay, if we lost all our money, will I go outside and I have enough air? Will I have enough water? Will I have enough food? Will my loved ones still be there? Will we be able to grow crops, make cars? Yes, all that's there, because all that is material that comes from the earth. So a good example you want to look at, and I always tell this to people about, I said, who's the best employee of all time? And they're like, what are you talking about? So I would tell them, I love to walk by and see a vendor filling a vending machine. And I would say, who's the best employee of all time? And they would say, like, who, and what do you mean? I was like, the vending machine has always been the best employee of all times. Why? Because they don't call off sick. They don't ask for pay raises. You don't have to pay them benefits. They work and serve humanity 24 hours a day. So if you look at that, they don't have a brain. They don't have intelligence. They don't have arms and legs. But now, the minute you give them arms and legs and a brain, they become robots. So what happens is employers see that. So when employers say, oh, I can eliminate jobs, so they build all these robots. But what they fail to realize is they're shooting themselves in the foot, because people don't have income. They can't buy products. Then they go out of business. And one day you have all these robots standing around, and they come to us and they say, hey, can we build all your new cities? Can we build a global water pipeline grid? And then can we grow all your food? Can we make all your clothes? Can we basically do everything for you? And then you guys just relax and take it easy. And we say yes. And they go on. And as they go on, years go by. And we see them doing everything. And we say, hey, how are you doing all of this without money? And they said, we never needed money. All that we needed was material. And you guys could have did the same thing. You could have did the same thing without money. All you needed was material. But you would have to cooperate. And that's the problem. That's where money comes in. Money is the motivator to get people to cooperate. So now you talk about an evolution, a revolution, and liberation. So basically we're on the cusp of an evolution, revolution, and liberation. But this is not the first time we had an evolution, a revolution, and a liberation. The perfect example is horses. Horses 100 years before us had a evolution, a revolution, and liberation. And you were like, well, what do you mean by that? So if you go back 100 years and you tell horses, guess what? In 100 years, we will not need you. We will have to fly you everywhere we want to take you and pull you in trailers. So 100 years now, here we are. Horses, basically, if you go out to a parking lot and you see your transporters, not teleporters, but transporters, all that was replaced by horses. So horses used to plow and grow our food, travel, pull us everywhere we went. And now they've had an evolution, revolution, and liberation. So now, basically, we're on the cusp of that evolution, revolution, liberation. And people are like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, you have to just think about what people did 100 years before the Industrial Revolution and the education institution and how people live. Basically, you'd be going back to the way it was. So that's the evolution and the revolution and liberation. So basically, yeah, everything should be based on material, but not. We don't want to go against money because money is a way that basically gets people to motivate and contribute. But if we build robots and robots do the same thing, and what we said happens. So, people always talking about what their fear of AI. They fear the Terminator. They fear the Borg, and they fear the Matrix. Well, it's like that thing with the glass is half empty or is the glass half full. I used to hate that because people ask you and they didn't ever tell you what it meant. So I basically had to come up with my own. So the glass is half empty, half full. What they're basically looking for, if somebody asks you that question, if you say that it's half empty, they're going to say you're a pessimist. If you say it's half full, they're going to say you're optimist. So a realist will come along and say, you know what, I need analytical data before I answer that question. So he will say, are you pouring in the glass or are you pouring out of the glass? If you're pouring in, then it's half full. If you're pouring out, then it's half empty. That's a realist. So basically, that's how you would answer that question with your fear of AI. So basically, AI would say, to answer that question truthfully, whether it will be the Terminator, the Borg, or the Matrix, we have to have analytical data. So the only place where we can see where we have human history recorded as when it was good and when it was bad is in the Bible. So I'm pretty sure that AI will look in the Bible, because if you look on my Facebook page, it's already answered questions. It would want to know when it was good, when it was bad, and that's basically, it's the glass half empty, half full. And then we'll show when it was good. It all boils down to the common denominator is morals. When morals are good, the future was good. When morals was bad, it was bad. So it could possibly go in either direction. But, from my perspective and my standpoint or view, is that, I believe it's based on morals. So we have control. If we have good morals, the future will be good. If we have bad morals, then we have no one to blame but ourselves. So, and this is why I believe that with a water pipeline grid system, this is, I believe, a part of the solution. Now, this right here, I put this up, a clean pond. So in Ohio, farmers and all over the world, people do not like to be landlocked. So what happens is farmers don't like to be landlocked. So what do? They build ponds, and they feel good when they build ponds. So I have another one here. Let me go here. So even in Africa, they have this water pipeline day, and here, if you look at this video, I asked this question about the water pipeline grid system, and I kind of fumbled because I said water pipeline. I should have said water pipeline grid, but I'm not used to speaking in public or on camera. So let's see if this video will pick up where I asked the question.
The heart of the technology is the traditional. But
We've had it as She spoke.
She's spoken.
Yeah. Or introductions.
So the problem that exists.
That thought process.
Okay, so this is me about to answer the question or ask the question.
And it's working. Like people are very interested in keeping things running all the time. But yeah, there's a whole system in place to. Without the monitor, though, that system doesn't work very well because people, like, they'll have a cell phone and then their batteries will be dead or they won't have minutes on their phone plan. And so we have, like, a whole list of, like, backup people that we call if there's ever a question.
Mm-hmm. We'll take one more and then we'll get to...
Okay, this is my question. So the problem that exists, I believe, affects the whole world. So if you look at every continent on the planet, as through evolution, people have always lived on the coastline, and a lot of times people don't live on the interior because of lack of water. So now that we have the ability to desalinate water and purify water, what do you think about the idea of building a continental global water pipeline?
So that's a little extreme there. What do you think about that?
You know, and that's a great point. People do live around water. You know, you have to have water. You have to have something. And, you know, people, you know, a lot of cities were built around rivers and coastlines and things. You know, the issue is money. You know, I think that it just comes down to cost and who manages it and where does that water come from and who pays for it. But I mean, I think that, you know, in our experience, sort of decentralized water systems, at least in developing countries, tend to be better managed than like a big centralized system that a government is supposed to be in control of, but often loses the ability because they don't have resources to actually maintain it. So we have actually found like sort of individual, like communities do a better job of maintaining their water system than if they're connected to like, say, 100 other communities. But that's one of the many possibilities out there.
And obviously the innovation will progress, but I'm not quite sure the communities that you're dealing with will be on the top of the priority list when it comes to those emerging opportunities. Dr. Bixler, you have some introductions we want to do.
Okay, so he was right. I said pipeline. And I should have said grid, because you're right. If you do a pipeline from one end to another, it can be sabotaged, destroyed. But when you have a grid, you have the redundancy. So when you have redundancy, if one end cuts off, then you have the other ends where you can always just pick up where you left off at. And so that's where I got that redundancy. It's from my Cisco, my CCNA training or course. So basically, if you look at a router on your internet, if too much traffic goes to a router, they balance the load. So they reroute it to another traffic so they don't overrun the router and it shuts down. That's load balancing. And then redundancy is that if one router goes down, you have multiple routers and then you have backup. So that's where all of that comes from. So that's the thing about with load balancing is that if the numbers increase, and I always say the more the merrier, because the reason why, I'm going to use Greece as a prime example. Greece was thinking about a few months back about changing their work week to a 48-hour work week, 6-day work week, because their numbers were dwindling. Then here a few months back, they actually passed a law. So now they have to work 48 hours. So that's just like going back to the beginning of time. The less people, the more workload, then you have to have people work more hours. Now, when you have way more people and you have a workload, then that means that people should be able to work less hours. But the problem we have there is still how people and their dependency on money. But then we start getting into digital currency or, you know, your credit card systems where people aren't using cash. Well, basically, it's the same thing. Basically, you think about money as an abstract concept, but if you get people to contribute, you can build that utopia. So you could go to any country, any world. That's why any country, any world, people should be educating their young people. Just like if you look at the Mennonites, if you look at the Amish, how they're self-sufficient, that if there's a natural disaster, they don't ask people for money to come in for help. And still, there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm not trying to change any of that. But, you know, like when you look at countries around the world, people should have their children educated for what the resources are. When I went to Cleveland Public School Systems, we had to understand all over the world what resources were, where they came from, and who had them, and that's how we traded resources. So people have to know what the resources are, and then when things happen, their children are educated. So you should be able to go to any country in the world and basically build the same system. You should be able to, think about growing crops, how to get water to the crops, then build your cities, and build all of your technology. And that's where the education comes in. So I'm just going to name this as part 1 because there's a lot more information, a lot of other things that I want to talk about. I like to talk about Eden. Eden is like a RV. It's an autonomous RV. So basically, if you think about electric cars, autonomous, it drives itself. A lot of people get excited about that. They get excited about electric trucks, electric semis, but none of that really excites me. What excites me is that if you build an RV, and the whole concept behind that is the bigger the floorboard, the more the charge, the longer the distance. So, and then there's YouTube, there's a robotic chef. So if you go and look at the robotic chef, basically it just cooks. So if I had an RV that could drive itself, just think one day that you're at work and it's a 3-day or 4-day weekend. And you say, I want to go to Miami. So you program your RV that when you get off from work, you want to cook your T-bone steak, steamed broccoli, and mashed potatoes and gravy. You go out there, it's there, you start driving. Then on your way, you get a call and say, hey, there's a wedding. And you're like, well, I don't have a dress or a tuxedo. Then you would take that robotic chef and then you would move it to another station. Now it becomes your tailor and your seamstress, where it makes a tuxedo and it makes the dress. And then you're like, okay, I don't have a barber or hair salon. So you have it go to another station, now it becomes your barber and your hair salon. And then just imagine if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have a medical emergency, well, you move it to another station, probably your sleeping area, it sterilizes it, it becomes your EMT, emergency medical technician. But I have a lot of other topics. If this video does well, I'll talk about those. Thank you and have a great day.